Beach Planning Commission is
Talk
now
about it afterwards if
in
you don't
order.
mind, okay? Or during break.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any objection to approving that by consensus? Okay. Is there a motion? Let's see whether I had any of my usual questions about the minutes. And on the second page of the minutes, the second full paragraph, first stated she was sent an article, discussion of Dune grass followed, Johnson and Risley proposed a presidential speech. Did we come to any agreement about whether we were going to take up this idea of having experiments with kinds of beach grass in the presidential?
You certainly talked about it. I would say there probably wasn't a clear consensus about that from my point of view, but there may be. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I had brought up the idea that the presidential area should be experiment with native grasses, and I wasn't sure if you had agreed with it.
Okay. Would you like the minutes to be amended while we're at it to reflect the fact that you were also?
Well, no, I brought it up, and
You
I
were
wasn't
the
sure if
first
Robin
person
had
who
agreed
suggested
to
it.
it, so
Okay.
I think it's fine.
Okay. Oh, Johnson and Risley, I'm sorry, proposed the presidential, okay. And this is,
May I make?
oh, of course.
Okay. So it says Risley stated FEMA may be changing their regulations, and actually I was talking about aligning the U.S. Geodetic Survey findings, and FEMA has to acknowledge those changes in 2020. So
I see.
I thought maybe there should be a little more clarification.
Thank you.
there on that.
This is probably something that can come up in the discussion of the tree removal and preservation, or whatever it is, amendments. I remember that we had, it seems to me that it was a recommendation, okay?
It's right on one hole.
It seems to me that it was the question of putting a fence around a protected area under where the roots of a tree would be, and one of the arborists had suggested so many feet per inch of diameter, and I think the thank you. The other had suggested some kind of more complicated algorithm that would take the judgment of the arborist and maybe the kind of tree and so forth and so on. And I suggested that it be up to the applicant about which process they were going to have, and I didn't notice that got memorialized anyplace in there.
And it didn't. I looked at my notes on that, and the short answer is I couldn't figure out exactly where we were going with that. So you may have to give me more explicit direction today.
So that was, okay,
So
that doesn't need to be in the minutes then, I guess, as long
No,
as
but
it can come up.
you do need to correct, make sure this comes out the way you want it.
Or gets rejected, either way.
Well, make sure it comes out the way you want it. Would be my vote.
We will, yes. Okay, having said that, on page 4, in the third paragraph of item 4, in the third line, there's a sentence that says, Johnson recommended a tree protection zone of 2 feet. And I think that was probably 2 feet per inch of diameter of the tree.
Right.
Okay. Can you pick that up, Alicia, or whoever? Okay, yeah. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as with the change?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, the way they are.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objection to approving that by consensus? Okay. Moving along to the first order of business here. This is a quasi-judicial public hearing regarding consideration of SR 18-03, request by Vito Cirelli for setback reduction in conjunction with a remodel at 3828 Pacific. The applicant, Vito Cirelli, on behalf of the property owner, requests a setback reduction in conjunction with a residential remodel to an existing dwelling. The setbacks requested are, this is, I gather, the symbol that you use for approximately?
The plus or minus?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Approximately 2.5 feet south side yard, approximately 4/10 of a foot north side yard, and approximately 10 feet front yard. The property is located at 3828 Pacific, tax lot 1300, map 41006BC, and in a residential moderate density R1 zone. The property is owned by Marilyn Brackett, Philip Alexander, and Shannon Alexander. Municipal Code Section 17.12.040.B standards requires a minimum 15-foot front yard setback and a minimum 5-foot side yard setback. The request will be reviewed against the Municipal Code Section 17.64.010, setback reduction provisions established. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Does any commission member believe he or she has a personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts? Has any commission member made a site visit? Okay, is there a staff report?
Yes, but before I do that, you probably noticed some personnel changes
Oh, yes,
here.
thank
I
you.
want to introduce Jill Janicek, who's sitting at the end of the table there. She's going to be replacing Alicia. She is replacing Alicia as the department's administrative assistant and your minute taker. And then this will be Alicia's last planning commission meeting.
Oh.
So make sure you wish her well when you leave
Yeah,
tonight.
We do,
for all you've done.
for all you've done.
So, staff report. This is a setback reduction in many ways like the ones you hear regularly, and this is in a lot of ways like the one on Orford Street that you heard earlier in the year, perhaps that was last year. The purpose of this is to do a roofline modification by putting in a dormer to accommodate some internal remodeling for that second floor. The criteria are things you're familiar with. The two that stand out here as most subjective are the significant views criteria, A2, the purpose of the setback reduction, which in this case they've suggested is dealing with an unusual lot configuration, A4, and then on the privacy one, A7, they don't show a window in this. The applicant has suggested that if they do put a window in, they could put in frosted glass, which would address that privacy criterion. So if you do get to an approval on this and the privacy criterion is out there, that's one way you can address that. There certainly might be other ways too. This is an unusual lot compared to its neighbors, or at least many of its neighbors, in that it's a through lot, that is, it is frontage on two streets, and it's a long, very narrow lot, 25 by 100. So it's not the standard 50 by 100 lot that you see in most neighborhoods in Cannon Beach, and it's a through lot. It's out of the standard also. There was not a lot of correspondence on this. There was an email exchange I had with some party that's in the notice area querying about parking, and I answered him. You can see that in there. I don't really know that that's testimony on point. It's more of the kind of correspondence I deal with on these fairly regularly. I included it in here, not because they were objecting or supporting it, but just as a point of information. There is parking on this, on the western frontage. Staff recommends approval on this based on what we know about it so far. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. And I already asked Mark, and he told me there is no additional correspondence. This is the call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the west door. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan and municipal code, which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Vito Sorelli, 31897 Maxwell Lane, Arch Cape, Oregon, 97102. So Mark covered a lot of the aspects of the design. It's an existing condition. The setback requests are per the existing footprint of the house. The two dormers that we've designed and requested aren't raising the existing roof line. They're just expanding the headroom at the location of the stairwell to access the two bedrooms upstairs, as well as the hallway and a future bathroom upstairs. So the two dormers, in our eyes, don't impact the existing conditions of the neighborhood view corridors and sight lines due to not raising the ridge. So we're keeping the existing ridge and minimizing the side pony walls that we'll be building to create access to the second floor, which already exists.
So you said that there are two dormers?
One on the north and one on the south, and that's due to the reason of the,
That's not in the drawing.
oh, it should be in the package, it was
Should,
submitted.
not-
And that's why the request was for the north, the south, and the east. So that's, I don't know how those drawings weren't submitted, but the stairwell's on the south,
I'm looking at this.
so that's, the dormers are actually a mirror image of those two. The stairwell's on the south, which is inadequate for headroom, and that's why that dormer's driven. And due to the request in this application for that south yard setback reduction, and then the north as well. So those would be the two dormers that would be requested.
Just looking to see whether in fact that's in the text. Okay, yeah, it is on the description. The added roof dormers plural have insignificant, I missed that.
I thought it was one, too.
I beg your pardon?
I thought it was one dormer, too.
Yeah,
And that is, I mean, the two dormers are per the request of the north, as you can see in this image, I guess, if you're only seeing the north, the east, and why we're requesting a south yard reduction as well. And I can send over to Mark, if he doesn't have those, the two image. I know there's a package that has the two sides, then the two dormers.
And there's a setback on the east, too.
Mark?
I'm looking at the public notice. So this was noticed correctly. It does mention both the north and the south side,
Yes.
so I don't think you're in any problem with that.
What about the east?
The east is due to it's only 5 feet off the street, and these dormers are within the 15-foot required setback. So the east kind of relates to both dormers.
Yeah, it was noticed correctly. It covers all three of those setback issues. But you're right, the drawing only shows the north dormer. the staff report only addresses the north dormer too. So if you do get to a decision on that, the findings, which I would normally write on this, are going to have to address both dormers.
I may have interrupted you. Did you have something more to say on this?
No, just if there's any follow-up questions on regarding those.
How high is the ceiling?
The ceiling in the current house is approximately 7 feet, just over 7.5 feet tall at the ridge. And so the dormer would be added to, because there's an existing staircase on the south. The south is actually a driving force of this dormer addition. The staircase goes up the south, and it only has approximately 5 feet of headroom, 5 to 6 feet of headroom clearance, and code's required to have 6'8". So the south is actually driving the main dormer, and then the second one is added headroom in the hallway as well, and the upstairs at the ridge.
Are they intending to use this as a rental?
I don't believe so. It's owned by 3 families, and currently they intermix and use it throughout the year and block out time. They can maybe respond to that, but to date, there's been no conversation as it being used as a rental.
I can't visualize it. I was assuming that it was considerably even less high than that. It's hard to believe that would be.
It's a shallow,
Habitable space.
it's a very shallow, so the first floor probably has a 7-foot ceiling height in the kitchen, and then there's 6 to 8 inch joists, and then this diagram that I've provided is about 7 foot because it's all framed with 2x4. It's an old cabin with minimal framing, so it's to date it wouldn't pass code with the access up to the upper floor. So
Anybody have any further questions for Mr. Cirilli?
Why do you think that it's not going to impact the people to the east? Because when I drove by today, it seemed to me that it would.
we looked at the grades, and there's a significant grade increase from the subject property as it climbs to the east and the upper deck, and the lots are staggered. This is a narrow lot, and it's kind of situated in between the tax lots, both to the east and the west, so they have a nice ocean view from their property, and then the properties behind, kind of it shifts the grid of the tax lots. And we purposely tried to design this dormer to not increase the ridge height. So it's the minimal approach we could take to gain access to the upstairs to meet code and still preserving the site corridor view lines between the 2 buildings.
Yeah, I mean, because when I looked to the east, it appeared to me like they had built stuff on their house just so that they could get a view, and it looked like it would block it, but, you know.
We felt with site visits and studies that it's a very minimal 2 to 3 foot tall addition to the existing wall height, with the dormer staying at the current ridge height. So we've kept everything as minimal as possible to even have access that meets code to this upstairs.
Yeah, I didn't go knock on the door of the house over there, but just eyeballing it, it looked as though what they would be losing would at most be some sight of the sky rather than, the ocean.
And I don't believe to date any of the neighbors to the east have submitted any questions or concerns about their views.
No.
So,
Any other? Thank you.
yep.
Are there presentations by proponents? No? Okay. Did somebody have a question that they wanted to ask that Mr. Cirilli said that Okay. Are there presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
Nothing here.
Gather that the applicant doesn't wish to make any additional statements at this time, so just sat down. I gather that there is no application for a continuance, so public hearing is closed, and we're going to move to consideration. Opinions?
given the nature of this structure, I think this is a really minimal request, and I'm more than willing to move that we approve this request for setback.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Lots of seconds. Further discussion?
Well, I'm just going to abstain because I don't know if it's going to interfere with the views to the east or not. I can't tell. When I looked, it seemed like it would, but I'm not very good at making a judgment like that. You know,
I was
Geometry
prepared, I
of
was
it.
prepared to have some kind of communication from the owners or occupants
you
or
may not know
somebody
about
there.
it. I mean, you
Well,
may not.
they were both notified, I just
Right,
checked.
but you don't know if they're around or,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah.
The one to the north is George Vetter, who's on the city council.
Oh, okay, so,
The other one is a name I don't
oh,
recognize.
No, I was
this is
talking about
next
to
door.
the
I was-
east.
To the east,
I think
yeah.
she's talking about the, across the
East.
street.
Across the street from them, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about to the north or south.
That is Vetter, to the east.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, across the
Two
street
to the
is
east.
better?
the
Oh, okay.
north is-
George would be affected the most by it.
Yeah. Yeah, but he
Okay.
was notified. He's on the notice list, as is his neighbor, Garrison. They're in Mill Creek, Washington, so they were notified.
Okay, further discussion. I came into this feeling like if somebody had a strong feeling one way or the other, it looked like it was going to go, I would go along. I don't have the fact that Dr. Burnt has gotten on board in favor of this, whereas he is usually one of the people who is saying, let's follow the rules here. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Okay, and anybody else have anything they would like to say before we have a vote?
I guess I agree that if this is going to take place, that there should be
Oh, yeah.
privacy glass,
If needed, or?
if needed.
I guess I would suggest, that was something I was going to say, that the owners or Mr. Sorelli or somebody discuss with the neighbors whether they have any concern about their privacy, and if they do, to have the translucent glass. And I figure, from the looks of things, just from the diagrams and from walking around the place, you can use however much light you can get in there. So, can we put that in as a condition that the applicant come to an agreement with their neighbors about whether the glass, if there is glass, whether it needs to be, whether it can be transparent or needs to be translucent?
How about this? If, as a building permit condition, if they are going to, if they're going to install anything other than privacy glass, they need to give us some evidence that they've cleared that with their neighbors.
Perfect.
Probably a letter or an email
Perfect.
on whichever side we're talking about here. And if it's on both sides, both neighbors. Otherwise, the default in the absence of any evidence that they've dealt with the neighbors would be privacy glass. Does that cover what you're trying to get at?
Is that change agreeable to the people, to the person who made?
It's agreeable to me.
It's fine with me.
Okay. Anything else before we have a vote? Okay, Alicia?
Can abstain, can I?
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Abstain.
Commissioner Risley?
Yes.
Commissioner Patrick?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Chair Lundy.
Yes.
Okay. This decision document should go out tomorrow. Thank
So
you.
I'll have something to sign at the end of the meeting. Yeah. I'm going to call a very brief recess while I go get my water bottle out of my car, which is right outside.
So I I talked to your friend.
Yeah, she said that she took us to let her know if there was a
Yeah,
change. And
yeah, well,
and she asked you for assurances 3 times, and she gave you her phone number.
I know, I've got it, and we just kind of sorted through this today, so I'm not
And
going
then
to be
she
able to call
gets
her
them-
until Monday.
And then her landlord gets a letter saying that she,
Well, I didn't realize it was the same property when we talked, but there is going to be a problem with that, the RV there. I had told her, she's got so here, I think that's what, Pacific Street?
Right, uh-huh.
So here's the street, and
Right.
her house is set quite a ways
Right.
back, and the RV is right
Right.
there roughly. So I had thought that,
Right on
hey,
the
as long as she's not in that 15-foot setback, she's okay.
Right.
But the way front yard is defined is it's all the way back to the dwelling. So she's not going to be able to do that.
well,
And
I
that's
don't get
what
what you mean, it's 15
He
feet from the
Well-
road, isn't it?
Yeah, the setback is 15 feet,
Yeah,
but
at any rate,
the restriction on RVs in the front yard goes all the way from the street to
I've
the
never
dwelling.
gone,
oh, so you're not allowed to have anywhere in the front yard?
Right, even if you're, in this case, set back quite a bit more than the minimum requirement.
Really?
Yeah, I can share that language with you, but
Yeah, I'd like to see the ordinance, because I
Okay.
couldn't find it.
I'll email it to you on Monday.
Okay,
But
all
I'm going
right.
to have to have a
So she,
conversation with her
she
on
can't
Monday.
have any,
well, better than
any RV
I think
anywhere.
on that lot, I don't know.
Where would you put it?
Well, it only works if you've got some side yard.
Which she doesn't
Anyway,
have.
anyway, I will
Okay.
get that to you on Monday.
Thank you
What
for
about in the
indulging me in that, and
this car
If
is,
that's
Come
on the
back to
side,
order.
yeah.
Driveway
But
is
I don't
on the
think-
side of the house.
If she can fit it
the
there,
next
maybe.
order of business is continuation of the public hearing in consideration of ZO 18-01 and CP 18-01, Fore Dune Management Plan amendments. ZO 18-01 and CP 18-01, City of Cannon Beach request for zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan text amendments updating the city's Fore Dune Management Plan. The zoning ordinance text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of the Municipal Code, Section 17.86.070.a, amendments criteria. The comprehensive plan amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of statewide planning goal 18. This item has been continued from the July 26, 2018 meeting. The public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission wishes to make a recommendation to the City Council, an appropriate motion is in order. And so we can move on to that. Mark, you want to sort of
Yeah, let me,
orient us, bring us
Sure.
back?
yes, so at your last meeting, we were going through primarily the Fore Dune Management Plan document, which we've been calling the CREST report. And that, those changes are in attachment A. And those also spawned some changes into B and C, which I tried to carry forward. So some of the changes you talked about last month were pretty clear to Hannah and I feel comfortable that we've captured them. For instance, on the first page of attachment A, you added that 5th goal, maintain the integrity and natural beauty of the dunes. We carried that forward and pushed that on through the document in the places that it belongs. So tell me that I'm wrong, but I think I understood what you were getting at there, and to me that implements what the direction of the discussion was going. Now, a lot of the other things you were talking about, though, were not that clear to me. So in some cases, Hannah and I were giving it our best shot. I know when we were sitting at that meeting a month ago, you said, you had your discussion, looked at me, is that clear? And I said, oh, yeah. And it probably was for a few fleeting moments there, but when I went back to my notes, I'm not entirely sure that I've caught what you were getting at there. So you may go through this and tell me I've really got that wrong. The other thing is that I've thought a little bit about the process on this, and here's a thought. The way we've been going through this is pretty close to wordsmithing this carefully, and I have no problem with that. That's a very appropriate way for you to handle this. We're just going to have to budget time for that. It's not going to be a fast process. Another option, if you don't have the time for that, or just don't want to clog up your agenda that way, is to give Hannah and I some just general guidance. This is the way we want this to come out, and see what we bring back to you. Because you're still dealing with the roots of this document, or the documents that we brought to you before you had any hearings, before you had any discussion. So those are, I guess, a couple ways you can go. And the way we went last month was kind of a hybrid of those two, and that may reflect some of the problems that I had. For instance, that the discussion we had during the minutes, there was comments, for instance, on that idea of doing an experimental plot in the presidential streets. It was an idea that was fleshed out, but there was no clear consensus that that was what the commission was thinking about. And I'm not suggesting you take a vote on every change, but if we're going to do this, we'll need pretty clear guidance on how you want that set up, and I'll need some idea that this is the thinking of the commission as a whole, rather than a comment by one commissioner that the others don't agree with. So kind of give that some thought on how you want to handle this. I'm all for going ahead and wordsmithing this, and if that takes us another month or a special meeting, however you want to do it is fine. We can work with that. Or if you want to give us some general guidance and have Hannah and I put our heads together and see if we can churn out something that meets that more general direction you want to go, we can do it that way too. So really, it's up to you how you want to get this to the finish line. As a reminder, you closed the hearing, so there's no more public testimony on this. You're making a recommendation. The city council also is going to have certainly a work session on this, and they may want more than one work session before they get to a hearing on this, and then they also will be conducting a public hearing. So even if you wrap this up this month or next month, we're still talking about a process that's going to range on into January or February or something like that, would be my guess.
Well, no offense at all intended, but I feel much more comfortable wordsmithing rather than giving general guidance, because we tried that already, kind of, and what the result was, is for me personally, was far from satisfactory.
Yeah,
And so
no offense taken. I think
Okay,
a
yeah.
line-by-line approach is fine.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through the documents and made some changes that I think should be included.
And I have
call that
too, yeah.
wordsmithing.
Yeah, and I didn't mean wordsmithing in a derogatory manner.
oh, no, I know,
just-
I didn't think you did.
But a line-by-line
Yeah.
approach is
Yeah,
fine,
okay.
and nobody here's feelings are hurt on this end. So
Okay.
if that's the way, if that works best for you, let's do that.
Okay. Okay, well, starting on page 1, I think that you have your 5 goals, and I think it makes more sense logically to have goal 4 and 5 switched. And the reason for that is those goals to maintain valuable habitat, the first 2 are sort of safety issues and things about maintaining the safety of the dunes. Then the next one is about habitat or environmental issues. And so 5 is also an environmental issue. And so I think it makes a lot more sense to have, and then has your 5th goal is to maintain the views, which is a totally separate and not related to the other 4. So I would like to see goal 4 and 5 switched throughout the document.
I agree that I have made notes to myself about that too, that they fit better.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with switching it.
I don't object to that, but I want to inject a comment, which I don't expect to be embraced, but just sort of on the record, that I don't understand what the meaning of integrity is in that context, other than maybe that it fits together or something. And I think that the natural beauty of the dunes, I enjoy the beauty of the dunes, but I would point out that it is an artifact of having introduced the European dune grass, and I think that characterizing it as the natural beauty of the dunes is also questionable. Having said that, I don't disagree with, assuming that we're going to keep that, I think it does make more sense to reverse the order of those 2.
And I totally disagree with you about the natural thing, because if you get into that discussion, what is natural, period? I mean, half the people walking around this earth aren't natural either, because they've had some kind of surgery or something done, so you can't, I think going there
Okay.
is really opening a can of worms of what is natural and what isn't. The fact is that I heard people in the community talk about how that's what they like about
That's
the
the way they
dunes.
like it, yeah. Okay,
So,
okay.
So
Other comments on this?
Yeah, well, I want to go back to the second paragraph, where it says specifically Tolovana North and south have experienced erosion. I think we should inject that it should read specifically, Toldwana North and South have experienced minor erosion.
What
As a
line?
matter of fact, as a matter of fact, there.
About the
if you
middle of
look
the
at
second paragraph.
Sand dunes around Toldwana, which I cover all the time, there's a buildup of sand. There's not a black sand there.
I certainly bow to Mr. Johnson's
Well,
familiarity with that.
I mean,
that
I've
area,
been
and
in that
my
area
lack of
15
familiarity.
years.
Yeah.
There's more sand there now than there's ever been.
Uh-huh.
And to continue that, on page 3, method of sand removal, on the second paragraph, the second method is to remove the sand from one dune and transport it to another area that lacks sufficient sand. And of course, there is no lacking of sand at Toldwana. An example provided in the 2018 background report is that sand could be removed from Chapman Point and transported to Toldwana South. This method would entail placing sand in trucks and driving it down the beach. Number one, at Chapman Point, you're not going to be driving down the beach over at Cola Creek. And I think that whole paragraph should be removed because you're, in the sand management process, you're moving the sand towards the ocean, not to other places. And that's prevalent throughout this report.
Where is the paragraph you're talking about?
I'm talking about the second paragraph on method of sand removal.
The second
Oh,
paragraph.
on page 3. I'm sorry. Okay,
On page 3,
okay.
Well, there are two methods of sand removal or transportation or whatever that are mentioned elsewhere in the report too. And one is, trucking it someplace, and the other is pushing it to the ocean side of the dune. So I don't know if
well,
I don't know if it's not appropriate to have, both methods listed here.
well, this is the only example that I found in the report when you're trucking the sand away from the area that,
Well, there's discussion of what time, what months that we would do trucking or pushing.
right, but this is the only place that I specifically see where they're talking about trucking it from one place to another.
And you object to that?
Yeah, I do.
Would it-
Well, I object to it because it shouldn't be moved by truck away from where they're doing the scraping. And also that there's a lack of evidence that the sand should be moved to the Toldwana area.
Well, I mean, that's what the Dogami report said,
Right.
that, in sort of mapping the patterns of sand, natural sand moving through the littoral cell. They're claiming that it's leaving the south and going north, and so the south is becoming depleted as the north builds up. I mean, are we going to not accept that report? I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I'm just asking.
I'm saying my evidence doesn't support what they're saying. That's what I'm saying. And so, there's a slice in time that they did the reporting, but it's certainly not that way today. I mean, to me, it's a step into, okay, we can't put more than 3 feet of 3 feet of sand on the edge of the ocean, so let's transport it to another spot. And I just object to the fact that there's not a need for it in these other areas.
There's in the Dogami report, I recall that it said that there has been an addition of sand into the littoral cell, presumably from offshore, over, I don't remember what period of time, maybe the last 30 years, something like that. Don't quote me on that. Does that account for where the sand is coming from, or do you have a feel for where it's coming from?
Well, Dr. Allen said that that there was nothing that he was saying that the area below the surface was calibrated if you travel from Hug Point south, there's more sand in that whole stretch than I've ever seen in the last 15 years. I mean, normally we're exposed rocks that are not exposed anymore. So that, in due time, that sand is going to move north. I mean, that's the prevailing current that's taking place.
And the notion is by trucking it, you can adjust to that prevalent shift of sand north, by shifting the sand south, where it came from.
Well, I mean, you're repeating the same problem. I mean, if the sand is moving north and you shift the sand south, it's going to move north again. So I find it rather silly that you're trucking sand in that area.
Well, Daryl, are you talking about exposure of the rocks at low tide?
I'm talking about rocks from the shoreline out to the ocean. At the end of Brayler, some people call it Lincoln's Head, there are tide pools in there. Well, right now, there are no tide pools there.
But that's happening at Haystack Rock too, and that's been a pattern that's happened there, that a lot of the tide pools have been covered up by sand moving in from the ocean into that tide pool area, which is a whole different issue than the sand blowing along the beach, above the low tide line. See, because, I mean, they're not gaining sand at Haystack Rock, but the tide pools are filled in, a lot of them, and have been for, more so than I've ever seen it.
Well,
So, and that's not because of more sand, it's not because sand is blowing from somewhere else. It has to do with what's happening in the ocean. Sand is moving in from the ocean and filling in those tide pools and rocks.
That may be, but, the difference really is calibrating what happens after storms in the winter versus what's happening in the summertime. But, during these summer months, I just observed that there is much more sand on the beaches from Hug Point down to Midtown.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because, that credentials the notion that the wind is different, comes from different direction in the winter and in the summer. And the strength of the wind is also variable. And overall, we've been told by several reports that wind from the south and waves from the south have a lot more shove than do waves from the north, no matter how hard the summer winds may blow in August, September.
Yeah, well, the big factor, I think, in that is we haven't really had the big winter storms that we normally, so this past winter, we had a lot of rain, but we did have a lot of wind, and so I don't think there's as much movement. So that varies from year to year.
Well, all right, well, I'd like to go back to page 1.
Oh, we're moving right along.
The goals here are essentially rewrites of state goals for justification of moving sand, which we're monkeying with right now, which is fine, that we can write our own plan, but I would like to bring back something that I bring back every time we look at these damn things, and that is number 3, to maintain valuable habitat for a wide range of plants and animals, and then including in some cases rare species, semicolon, and something doesn't exist thereafter. I would like to use, my favorite clam, the razor clam, as the supposed canary in the coal mine, and one indicator of whether this movement of sand is affecting the habitat for a wide range of plants and animals. So I would like to see this, the including phrase, including in some cases rare species, and in particular razor clams and which are sort of North Coast icons, that seems to me.
Say again?
Including in some cases rare species and particularly razor clams, razor clam population, something like that.
How about shellfish? I mean,
Well,
including shellfish.
I would like to have one species mentioned in this case, because I think it's important to a number of residents of this town. And it's something that is rare for the most part. Most people in this country don't know what a razor clam is. And I think it's something that we could insert as one measure, and it's also a measure that we could require when we get further on in here in terms of reports on the sand removal and scraping and
Why wouldn't shellfish cover them? I mean, because we're not mentioning any other species. We're not mentioning elk, we're not mentioning,
yeah, I know,
you
I
know,
understand.
rabbits.
We could have a whole list of domestic rabbits as well, but.
Right,
but-
so how
but
about just shellfish? Because that includes
I guess
razor clams. I just don't see why.
because we had evidence at one point, and I don't know where it went to, of scientific studies of razor clams and what happens when you throw sand over them, and how much sand you can throw over them before you kill them. And that's the reason I want razor clams mentioned in here. Because sooner or later, I'm going to find that damn report.
Well, no, it was in the
Yeah.
report. It's in here, very, several pages that address that.
Yeah.
And just razors?
Just razors.
And it was just on razors, and my memory is that 12 inches seemed to be the maximum amount of sand you could dump on razor beds without killing them off. But I don't have the document now.
Yeah, and it was also a difference between killing juveniles plus versus adults.
Right.
And I think that the height of the limit on coverage in that study was 18 inches. But
That was the
on the razor.
that was as high as it went, yeah.
Yeah, well, when they did the experiment inside, I think that's what that was.
But so the reason I'm focusing on it is that, one, it gives a focus. Shellfish, they have different, they have different sand experiences.
And they may be being hurt just as much.
I know, and they may be, and you could say, and shellfish such as razor clams. That'd be another way of coming to a resolution, I think, between the two of us. But I just think that it's important to have that canary out there that people can point to, and you can measure this valuable habitat which we don't define.
Okay. I like that better than just bringing up razor clams. I love razor clams. It's not, I have anything against it.
And then, one of the things that you can see in the minutes that we just approved from the last discussion, we were going to bring all 4 of these goals into each discussion, and that didn't happen in this report. For each area and so
5
forth.
goals.
Well, they're 4.5 now, but
What do you mean?
we had talked about how all of a sudden we go from having these goals, and when we apply them to any area, we only have 2. We worry about inundation and of sand and water and views, but we don't say anything about the valuable habitat and so forth as we lay out these management strategies.
Yeah, I added that fifth goal in every one of these management objectives.
Which fifth goal?
The maintain the
Integrity and
integrity.
natural beauty,
Yeah.
all the management goals, I remember,
Yeah, it's
they
in,
were all here,
it's in all of the
Okay, let me-
management units.
yeah.
Let me get a specific example. Okay, in area 1, on page 10.
Page what?
Page 10. You got these management objectives listed above, apply to each subunit. Priority management objectives in this subunit, area 1, is maintain or enhance ocean flood erosion protective functions of the natural foredune area. And that's it. Everything else disappears, including my precious clams.
That's because Area 1 doesn't allow dune grading for views. That's the southernmost 2 blocks of the presidential streets.
So,
And we don't allow dune grading for views there. So you're right, we could add, maintain the natural integrity of the dunes, but the other, well, yeah, we could add that there.
Well, it doesn't make sense though, if you don't, there's no dune grading, why would you?
Yeah,
well, why do we have any then?
yeah, you could add, it definitely could be added.
My point is that all 4 or 5, or however we want to,
Well, you definitely don't want to add the one that was number 4, because that would imply that we do allow dune grading for views there.
right.
So this would be a 4 objective area, not a 5 objective area.
Okay, then in area 2, we're worried about, stormwater and wind-blown sand and so forth, and stabilizing vegetation. But what else?
Well, if you go back to page 9, I've listed all 5 of the,
And they apply to all
there,
subunits.
and they apply to all subunits.
So then why do we list any of them then?
That's a good question. You don't need to.
All I'm saying is
Yeah.
I want the structure to be parallel.
Yeah, I follow what you're saying now.
And also on 10, area 2, you have on the paragraph on the grading of the foredune is permitted down to BFE plus 4 feet. The lower slope will extend approximately 200 feet out seaward for the secondary foredune crest and down the elevation approximately. So you have approximately 200 feet, but in other places in the report, it's 250 feet. I think it should be consistent.
I see, on the next page, you can see that, yeah.
Didn't Robin bring up the idea of, or suggestion to increase the BFE plus 4 feet? Because FEMA doesn't take the global warming into account. So all through the document, it seems to be FEMA BFE plus 4 feet, but I thought that we had a discussion about increasing that 4 feet, foot number. And so that I don't see that reflected. And what do you guys think about that? I mean, since they're not taking science into account, global warming, therefore, should we, by increasing the 4-foot amount?
So what's your recommendation then?
More. I don't know how much more.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but
want to add language that says 4 feet or more, or do you want to, how do you want?
What do you think, Robin? It was you're the one who brought this up, and I thought it was a great point.
Well, thank you. It was a concern. I think we should maybe talk to an expert who would maybe have a feeling for that, but,
If you say 4 feet or more, it's so ambiguous. I mean,
right.
I have a suggestion, and that is put wording in saying DFD plus 4 feet plus how, this is not going to be the exact word, but
Right.
however much current indications from authoritative sources say is being, sea level is being raised as a result of climate change, or, well, is rising, how much, we don't even have to say, as a result of what, how much sea level it has risen since the last time that it was updated, something like that.
There's actually a pretty big body of research on Oregon about sea level rise impacts expected over the next century. Dr. Allen's involved in a lot of that. So we can probably come up with a number there.
Okay. Could you talk to him?
I'll get the documents from him,
Okay.
yeah, and make
That would
sure
be
I
even
understand them. Yeah.
Super. That's great.
Because the geodactic survey is going to tell us in 2020 that it's lower than we think it is.
The weather's wetter?
That the height is lower than we think it is now, or that FEMA says it is. It's going to have to be readjusted
Upward.
Downward.
down.
Downward.
Oh,
Who said that?
Well, Michael Magyar, who is a surveyor and a fellow that's going to put a class on for the realtors within the next couple months to just explain what's coming. But he's out of Astoria.
But is it a federal government document?
Actually,
Or based on-
and Mark, maybe you can explain it better than I can, but the geodactic survey is something that FEMA needs to adjust to. It's part of NOAA.
Yeah, you look at, on page 11, the second paragraph down, it refers to NAVD 88. That's the vertical datum of 1988. Prior to that, we used an earlier vertical datum, I can't remember what year it was, quite a while before that. And what I think Commissioner Risley's getting at is that this is going to be adjusted yet again. And all of our documents that refer to elevation don't just say, for instance, the flood maps don't say 20 feet above sea level, they say 20 feet above sea level, NAVD 88, particular datum. And when that datum changes in the next, I don't know what the time frame is, the next few years, those maps are all going to have to be reset, those numbers will all change. That's a little bit different than an analysis of the impact of sea level rise. It's more a function of just resetting, recalibrating this number that we all call sea level in common parlance, but actually has a more precise meaning for people who are doing surveys and trying to figure these things out. And there's always some kind of chaos when we do the changeover. When we did the changeover to 88, I was working as a planner, and it really was confusing. There was a time when we were doing the changeover, and you had to be real careful about knowing which datum we were talking about. And there was, I don't know, just a rough period there. It took 18, 24 months before people finally everybody had made the transition and nobody used the old datum anymore. So I expect that that's going to happen again when we update all of those datum. But that's going to happen irrespective of what the feds think about sea level rise. And the sea level rise changes a number that can be imposed on whatever datum that is. It'll be +3, +5, whatever it is. And you don't need to, we want to calibrate this to the datum we're using now, which is NAVD 88, knowing that that's likely to change in the next half dozen years or so.
and if I understood correctly what Robin said, the expectation is that that they're going to say, sea level is actually lower than we thought it was, or higher?
Because it's more accurate.
It quite possibly is a lower number. When we went from the old one to the NAVD 88, the numbers changed by, I can't remember, it was less than 2 feet, but more than 1.5 feet. I can't
Really?
remember exactly what it was.
Wow.
But there was a discernible change. That doesn't mean that sea level literally jumped or
No,
fell.
of course.
It just meant that the numbers had to be, it's just a datum from which you're measuring, I guess. And I don't mean just, because it's important, but it's just two separate things going on here, sea level rise and this datum change.
Yes.
So what language change in this would accommodate what we need to accommodate?
You can always refer to the current FEMA maps, because we will use the FEMA maps we just adopted right up to the date when there's new FEMA maps available, which will presumably have this new datum in it. And I've tried to word, for instance, our flood hazard overlay zone in an agnostic way that refers to the current FEMA maps, so that when we do adopt, let's say, 2025, the new set of maps might become available, and then you could adopt those maps without necessarily having to go back and rechange all those notations in your code. So there's a way of doing it in an agnostic fashion. You can also just refer to the datum and know that you're just going to have to change that.
Realistically, separating out the climate change, in terms of the change in datum, it is going to have huge impacts, but there are conversions that people can make so that, the NAVD 20, let's assume, there will be a method to convert NAVD 20 to NAVD 88. So if you use NAVD 88, even with the new datum, it'll be fine. So it is going to add a layer of complexity when you measure it, but it can still be measured, and this, using the way it's written now, is going to be okay.
And that's why BFE plus 4 doesn't refer to a datum, it just refers to the base flood elevation in whatever datum it's presented at. So that's kind of an agnostic way of dealing with it.
I see what you're saying.
And that's all I meant. The sea level rise component is separate, and that turns out to be BFE plus 4 plus a component for sea level rise predicted over the next, pick a number, half century or something like that. And you could do that in an agnostic way that doesn't depend on the datum also.
So we'd actually say that?
I wouldn't say use those words, but you would say, we've picked a minimum dune height of BFE plus 4 plus a safety factor to account for sea level rise. Here's the
I like
reference to
that.
sea level rise, and based on the studies we see, it's over the next.
Plus a safety factor for that
Yeah.
takes into account sea level
Yeah,
rise.
and
We
we
can
can-
say that in this.
I think we
Yeah,
can,
okay,
but I think we
okay.
want to identify that we're looking at, and now I'm making stuff up, a 50-year horizon, and based on these reports, sea level rise in this part of the northwestern Pacific is predicted to rise half a meter. I don't know, something like that. Whatever the number
There
is.
should be a number from.
Yeah, it's a
projected
number.
by NOAA or somebody.
There should be a number that we should be able to plug into that.
Okay.
So that's the way I would foresee this going.
Okay.
BFE plus 4 plus a safety factor. The safety factor is calculated.
Okay,
Does that
Yeah.
get at what you're
yes,
looking at?
it does.
Yes.
Then the datum change, I guess I would leave out of this for now, because we're still under NAVD 88, and if that changes, we'll either incorporate the conversion factor into all of our permit discussions, or we will edit this and change the numbers in here more literally. But you could do it either way. They both are workable. That's happened in the past. I mean, when it changed to 88, I can't remember if you add or subtract a 1.5 feet, but there's a fairly straightforward conversion that at the time when it was hot, I knew about it. I've forgotten it.
Could you all think that we should add that language, accommodation for,
Yes.
So I'll get you that documentation that I was referring to, and in a subsequent draft, add that
Okay.
kind of language that shows
Okay.
up in a lot of places.
thanks.
hesitate to start saying very much because I've got a whole nother round of down in the grass wordsmithing, which I'm not sure when to input that other than to hand it to Mark at the end of the evening. There's one thing that recurs quite a number of times, and let's see if I can find the first place that it does. There's a bunch of places where it says to maintain weak points in the dune system, which seems like a bad way to say it, because it said we got to keep those weak points in there. And so my suggestion was to replace maintain with remedy in all cases, but I would certainly be open to some other word that has the same sense, that could not be interpreted as meaning we've got to keep the weak points weak.
Strengthen the weak points.
That's fine. Let's see if there's another thing that occurs. I think this is probably the same in the other places, so I'll just read it where I happen to see it at the moment. Minimize inundation brought about by excessive accumulation of wind-blown sand and correspondingly maintain or enhance ocean views. I don't understand what correspondingly means there.
What page are you on?
Oh, that occurrence of it is at the very top of page 11. It's also around the middle of page 10.
And that's for, okay, and the one on page 11 is for area 3.
Yeah, the minimize inundation, that's a kind of a mashup of both remedial dune grading and dune grading for views. And although those are separate permit processes, and I kind of strive to keep them separate, there are times when they're going to be talking about the same pieces of sand.
Does it mean, and in the process, maintain or enhance ocean views, or incidentally, or?
Yeah, incidentally or in the same process or coincidentally, something like that.
What? You understand what is,
Yeah, no, I see what you're
presumably,
saying.
if you can come up with some phrasing that makes
Yeah,
it clear
correspondingly is the
what the
wrong word, but
intent is there,
incidentally
I would
or
appreciate it.
at the same time or something like that. Yeah, and you're right, that phrase is going to repeat here.
Okay. And on page 15, and I've noticed this, there's kind of a passive voice that I'm really unclear about. It says, talking about beach grass maintenance for views or to accumulate intervening sand. And it's talking about mowing of beach grass. And it says, because mowing of beach grass can result in a significant reduction in the trapping efficiency of the plant cover, it shall only be carried out following consideration of its potential impacts. Consideration by whom?
Mowing is now allowed administratively in a type 1 or 2 process, and there is no hearing on that unless it's appealed.
I thought we were going to take it out.
You can if you want.
Yeah, that was what
Yeah,
we talked
I
about
had
last
added a phrase, and approval by who?
Oh,
You know, the
yeah.
consideration and, only followed by consideration and approval by whoever, maybe that's
Somebody.
Mark.
Yeah.
Well, you can, your alternative would be to make that, more of a conditional use permit or something like that.
So something like case-by-case basis.
It is a permit-by-permit basis. We don't
It's an
allow,
administrative permit right now.
Correct.
And I think that we were talking about having no longer be an administrative permit, but you have to.
conditional use
Yes,
permit, much like, okay.
Right.
I mean, that was my understanding, and I struck down on beach grass maintenance, the same thing. And if mowing is to be carried out, it shall be kept to a minimum done between March and October. And that doesn't seem, I mean, that's the height of tourist season, and that's when people are thinking of the beach dunes as having natural growth on the dunes, so I don't see that we should actually allow for mowing. It seems to me like it's disruptive and certainly doesn't enhance the view of the ocean.
Well, you know, I like a good shot at the ocean over a crew cut.
Well, that's good for you.
Yeah.
So I've heard both delete it entirely or make it a conditional use permit.
Well, I wrote in the margin, said, this is really fuzzy. You know, we don't talk about, you know, what kind of potential impacts, you know, and who approves this stuff, and, you know, it's just an invitation to go out there with your weed whacker and nail the,
Yeah, I mean, I underlined on 14, maintaining program and limited mowing and pruning should be removed. So I'm thinking in terms of what we discussed earlier, that mowing wasn't what we were going to allow.
Where was that?
On 14, on the first paragraph under
Oh.
maintenance program, planting of secondary species in some areas and limited mowing and pruning, I just said that, you know, I wrote that it should be removed, and limited mowing and pruning should be removed.
So the actual standards for mowing are in the zoning ordinance section, which is kind of the attachment C of this on page 9. So that's what I actually impose when I do approve these permits. And we approve, I don't know, a couple of them a year, maybe 3 or 4. They usually cover 1 or 2 or 3 adjoining property owners. They tend to get together and hire somebody for it, that type of thing.
This is in the in the presidential streets area, or where?
Predominantly in the presidential streets, but also, it's mostly in the presidential streets. There might be some south of Gower. I'm trying to think if there are any there, but the vast majority are in the presidentials.
Well, we could make it a conditional use permit or take it out. Those are the two choices.
Well, I think you're just encouraging a line, and I don't think that's what it's supposed to be.
What's the result? What does it look like after they mow?
Just what you would imagine.
I don't know.
We're supposed to mow it to no more than 6 or 8 inches.
No lower than 6 or 8 inches, or no higher?
Can't mow it any lower than 6 to 8 inches is the standard.
But it doesn't seem like, I'm just trying to visualize it, I can't imagine that it's thick enough that it would be at all lawn-like or green.
No, to me, you'd have little stubs out there if you were mowing it down to 6 inches.
Using a weed eater, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like you're
So I guess
destroying
so we have to just, it seems like that's where we're going. Either take it out entirely or make it subject to a conditional use permit.
If you do this as a conditional use, my recommendation would be to approve this and then make it a multi-year permit, because people tend to come in for this at about the time they want to do it. And
so these are the same people over and over?
typically they are, and I typically, on a new one, we will notice it on a renewal, we just renew it.
So it's sort of like a personal beach, deep shade.
Yeah,
it's-
I mean, just because that's the way they've been doing it doesn't mean that that's a good way to do it.
I
mean,
hear you. I'm just
maybe
saying
people
that-
have to change their habits too.
Yeah, the downside of prohibiting it entirely is that people go ahead and do it anyway, and then we're totally unregulated at
It
that
should
point.
be obvious when it's being done.
It's obvious after it's done,
In the middle of the night, they get a weed eater out.
more likely weekends, but yes.
I'd like to see it taken out.
I'd like to see it taken out.
I'll join that chorus.
I don't have strong feelings one way or another.
And I'm easy with either way.
Okay.
Okay, and then also on 14, the very last paragraph, where after the initial planting an area of the foredune, crest of the foredune, and other exposed areas with less than 30% vegetated cover shall be replanted, I think that number should be 50%, not 30%. If you have a 30%
Yeah.
take, that's so minimal that it's pretty obvious it needs to be replanted. I think it should be bumped up to at least the area less than 50% vegetative cover shall be replanted with beach grass.
See where that is? Find it.
That's at the very
It's the
last
Very
three
bottom of
lines of
14,
page
yeah.
14.
On page 14, yeah.
Second to the last.
No, the last paragraph. I mean, 30% coverage is
It's not going to do it.
it's not going to do it. Right.
So I'd like to go back to page 3. Before I forget to exist. Under the Ford Dune configuration section. All sand graded from the dune must be moved seaward and placed on the foreslope of the dune. Well, this may get back at Darrell's concern about transporting sand. First of all,
Where exactly are we?
on page 3,
Second paragraph down.
second paragraph.
Okay.
Where the existing.
Must be, okay, yes, got it.
Okay, so one, it doesn't deal with transporting sand. But secondly, it doesn't define what moved seaward really is, and what is being placed on the foreslope of the dune? Did the foreslope start, 10 meters into the low tide, or where does that dune start and stop?
It seems to me that we've got diagrams defining it in the Allen report, but they're obviously not incorporated here. Is that something that is an understood term to whoever is occupying your office?
In the places where we have approved dune grading in the past, Breakers Point and the presidentials, there is a pretty clear foreslope on the dune. There isn't too much ambiguity there, at least in my mind. And each of these comes to you as the form of a conditional use permit. So if there is some ambiguity in a particular proposal or a particular area, or in your own minds, you could drill down on that. I'm not sure how to define it other than with reference to, Alan's report has some kind of generic dune diagrams. We could refer to one of those.
Well, again, this gets to my beloved clams and how much grimy sand is going to be thrown on them. And so it seems to me that if moving sand seaward means pushing it right out into the ocean, that's going to have a major impact on its clam beds. And I think it ought to be fairly clearly defined as to just how far that dune goes down toward the ocean and how far the dozer is going to push the sand into the sea.
Joe, I don't think that anywhere in this document that anyone's giving a rip about the clams. I mean, I think that's always been that has been the way things have been done, pushing it seaward, period.
I know.
And I don't know what the alternative except trucking is, but I'm just saying.
Well, it depends
In other
on-
words, I just think that if it's kind of like if you're going to have grading, that's the only way it's going to be done.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you put it on the ocean side of the dune, the face of the dune, and let high tide come in and wash some of it out and back and forth, and gradually, you're not going to have this massive dump of sand right at the edge of the ocean. You know, the dozer or the front loader or whatever can drop the sand at the front side of the dune and not push it all the way down to the incoming tide. But the incoming tide can meet the dune.
I guess the question arises of how much sand can you put actually on the face of the foredune? And my guess would be not very much at a time. And so if we really take this seriously, and we say that we're not going to sort of say start at the top of the foredune and just go on out more or less to the water line, that we're going to have to say, okay, how far down can you put it, and
How deep?
and when you've moved that much sand, you're going to have to stop putting any more in there until that sand is washed out, which is, I think we could say that.
Well, I think if we give much of a damn about any of the shellfish, it's something that we
I
can
know,
find.
it just seems to me like what you're saying is you don't want dune grading.
No.
Well, you don't.
I don't, I think it's a silly battle, but if it's going to be done, I just want to make sure that it's not going to violate the basic guidelines that the state has imposed on the process. And one of those guidelines is not to screw up the habitat of the flora and fauna.
Yeah, and so I'm just saying, what I'm saying is, I don't know if it's possible to grade the dunes to the extent that some people want to grade them without doing that.
Well, then don't grade them to that extent.
Okay, well.
I mean, we had a limitation on how many yards of sand can be pushed around. And that probably was a limitation that could be dealt with by putting it at the base of the dune, foredunes, without having
I have
18
no
inches
idea
of
what
sand
that would
sitting
be.
out in the...
I mean, what that, I just don't have any idea what that would be, what the number would be, how we would calculate that and how, I don't know.
Well, I ain't an engineer.
Well, I'm
They do exist.
Huh?
But, now it's just undefined. Push it wherever you want, as long as it goes toward the ocean,
Yeah,
no matter how much.
no, that's right. Is that right?
Yeah, you're doing this as a conditional use permit, so you've always got that ability to calibrate the volume, the placement of it. So if it's on the face of the dune, you can kind of limit it. Maybe that's the limiting factor, is how much you can place on the face of the dune without getting into clam beds. Or if you're doing beach disposal, surf zone disposal, the limiting factor might be the depth of sand that you can place without harming invertebrates.
So you're saying that's built into this already?
Well, no, it's not. That's a way of dealing with that.
Okay.
Those issues. If that's, I'm kind of trying to guess the direction you're going, but yeah, if that's that might be the limiting factor in many cases, damage to invertebrates on the beach. And you could calibrate the volume and the disposal method based on limiting it to volumes and disposal methods that don't damage that habitat.
And where would that go in this document? That's what I'm trying,
Well,
would that happen?
Yeah, I think that
There?
happens. I think that happens in here.
Well, this is, methods of sand removal.
And it happens in here, and it gets carried forward into policies and in the permit process. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think this is the place to start dealing with it.
Okay, that sounds good.
But that idea of kind of limiting volume and disposal methods based on their impacts to all of these factors, but in this case, invertebrates in the sand. Is
Well,
that,
all the factors,
yeah, but and
all
that's,
five. I
yeah,
mean,
all of the factors, those are going to be used to limit volumes and placement.
right.
Okay, then, yeah, that's something we can incorporate into here and carry forward into the implementation
Okay.
measures.
And it would, it's the kind of thing that would vary where the sand dune happens to
Yeah.
rest on the beach.
Yeah, I think the answer is going to be different for each permit. So
Right.
this is an appropriate, a conditional use permit process is an appropriate way to implement that
Okay.
notion.
That makes sense to me.
And it's not as if you can't push sand toward the, into the ocean. You just can't push more than maybe 10
A
inches.
certain amount. So
Yeah.
I just want, so it gets incorporated into his rewrites. We should make it, is there a consensus about that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Well, we'll see if I can retain this in my
And we
fuzzy
did have
memory.
that study that told us.
Yeah, I don't remember whether it was incorporated in the Orca document or whether, or we got it at about the same time. I thought I had it in this several pounds of paperwork, but it looks like that's not a category of things that I
Yeah.
have there.
And that was Fish and Wildlife too, that was giving us that.
Was it Fish and Wildlife, or was it the Corps? Or was it, I have an idea that it was the Corps that was dumping the sand, and somebody was doing a study of the,
I've talked to Crest about doing kind of a mini literature review on this topic, so that's probably the way I would try to bring that forward to you.
Okay.
we've got it somewhere in the.
Yeah, we have,
In the
Orca
history
submitted
of
a document, it was
the
either this
documents that
process
we
or a
present.
previous
It was
permit
Orca.
process. Yeah,
It was Orca, yeah.
And it was, what I can't remember is whether it was part of this
That's right.
process or the last permit process.
I think it was the last permit.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
so that makes sense. So we should be able to find that, and there's some other research out there that touches on this too, so.
Okay. Right. That's good.
Okay, if you continue on down on page 3. In the last paragraph, this is real, techie kind of stuff, I suppose, but applying both approaches could be the sand to another location. So something got
Yep.
removed there that ought to be returned or fixed or dealt with, but it just irritated me.
Yeah, good catch, thank you.
I'm sorry,
The first sentence of the last paragraph on page 3.
oh, okay.
It's just a dangling
And
phrase.
Trucking,
what happened to making it consistent with the Allen report as far as times of year? I thought we discussed that.
Except the city doesn't like it.
Well, I know, but, so, okay.
Well, I guess my question about the city's, concern about when we move sand is why shouldn't people who use the beach have the opportunity to see what it entails?
I just thought in the last discussion we had, we decided, maybe I'm just remembering it this way because I want to. We decided to make it the timing consistent with what the Allen report recommended, not what the city wants for tourism. That's what I thought. Am I right or
I
wrong?
could be wrong, but I don't remember that.
You're right, Lisa, because I can remember bringing up what the city was, not the city, but I think more the chamber, was thinking, and I kind of got shot down on that one. So, yeah, it was the
Well,
Allen report recommendation that I think you wanted at that time. But it can always be brought up again.
Well,
It can, but-
the other thing is that, you have to replant after you remove sand usually. And so this period of doing it in June, July doesn't make any sense because the replanting is not going to be very successful at that time. So it's like, it should be done earlier. It shouldn't be done
Well, if you grade in June and July and try to replant in August, you're probably either a small enough project irrigating it, or if it's too large to irrigate, you're probably putting down cocoa matting for a couple months and then replanting once you know that some rains are on the way.
Yeah.
So
But I mean.
It's doable,
in
but
terms
it's-
of I mean,
it's not
yeah,
what we've done, and it's not optimal.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in the background report, said the optimal time of year was May through July, so we're just gonna not go with that. We're gonna come up with a better time, we think.
I mean, I feel it should be earlier, just because of the revegetation prospects of stabilizing needs to be done earlier, not that late in the summer. And then going.
So what are we gonna end up with here? So we gotta do something with this, because it says, as described below, this is unacceptable to the city, the May through July. This is under methods of sand removal, page 3, first paragraph, last sentence. As described in the 2018 background report, the optimal time of year for the method is May through July. As described below, this is unacceptable to the city. So what are we going to go with then?
I mean, my feeling is optimum time would be April through May, or April through June, either way, but not July. But that's what, I mean, I'm just
And
looking
that's what
at-
we've typically done is
Yeah.
kind of that April timeframe, get the plants in the ground, you're going to catch still a fair amount of rain, and hopefully that's enough to get them started.
Do we want to change that to April through what?
June?
I would say April through June.
And so we take out, as described in the 2018 background reports.
Yeah.
We're not doing that anymore. The optimal time of year for this is May through June.
No, April through June.
I'm sorry, April through June.
And then take
And then
out,
take the last sentence out.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it?
So the optimal time of the year for this method is April through June, period.
and then take out as described
And
below.
the last sentence goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on
And take out as described in the
Right.
2018 background report.
Right, yeah,
Just
Yeah.
start the sentence, the
Right.
optimal time.
right.
Yeah.
And then addressing vegetative planting specifications on page 18, the last sentence that carries on over to 19, stock shall not be held in the healing period for a period exceeding 14 days. I think it should read in beds for a period not exceeding 14 days.
Shall be held
Shall be held.
Shall be held
in the healing in beds for a period not to exceed.
not exceeding 14
Not
days.
to exceed.
Okay.
And then on the planting, just below that, you have planting hills. The space between hills shall average 12 inches by 12 inches in areas recommended for high-density planting and 18 inches by 18 inches in low-density planting. My feeling is that it should both low and high, because it's pretty hard to distinguish the difference, that the planting distance between hills should be 12 inches in both cases, both in high density and low density.
See in number 2?
Yeah, number 2.
But remind me what the occasion is for low-density planting.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't really make much sense to me.
Depending on which kind of grass.
Do either of our other staff people out there remember what that was about?
I would say definitely 12 inches. Yeah.
Hannah, you remember?
I think that I just pulled this from the Rolex document. So
Mm.
if you want to do low density, do it this way. If you want to do high density, do it this way. So we can just say, we're doing
This
high density.
12 inches?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So there
Don't
is
have
no-
to say anything about high and low density.
There is no low and high, it's just 12 inches.
Yeah.
And then on 7, if we are going to change the coverage from 30%, it should be 50%. That should be also included on
Yeah.
in 7.
Number 7. To be
And then
consistent
in the
with-
table below, then we should strike the low density out of that. On the chart of high density, low density,
Strike the low density.
that low density would be not included in that.
First column goes away, among other things.
I'm looking at the table.
Right. So the left-hand column goes away, and the third row goes away.
Without
Taking out low
without
density.
more than one row, I'm not sure that merits a
Yeah,
table
it seems
anymore.
like, it seems
Yeah.
weird to have a table
Yeah,
there at
yeah,
all.
right.
Looks silly.
I might just drive that,
Yeah.
I would
drive
just,
that back into the
okay.
text.
And then on maintenance, on the very first line, maintenance is required on beach grass for about the for the first 2 years. I think it should not read about the beach grass for 2 years. And
Take out the about.
remove about, yeah,
For the first 2 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
And continuing on 20, planted area shall be given an annual application of 200 pounds acre of fertilizer or supplement with compost or bicarb. I don't think you should be fertilizing annually. I mean, I think you would be fertilizing the first year, possibly the second year, but I don't think you'd be fertilizing after that. So I don't think we should have annual in there. Annual application should be.
You're sort of a resident plant expert on the commission. Do we have any
Any fertilizer experts?
any fertilizer experts out there in the front row? Any opinion about right, Mr. Johnson's view that this should only be in the first year?
No, what it's, I mean, what it's implying is that this annual fertilizing would cover, I assume, the 5-year period that you're monitoring that, and I just, I mean, I don't think you should be.
Well, I think it's, the intent there was to match up with that maintenance requirement for 2 years.
Yeah, well.
But if, your point makes sense. It isn't supposed to be a perpetual thing unless you have a failure there that clearly was caused by lack of nutrients.
I mean, I wrote down the first 2 years. Remove
Yeah, and that would match up with
Yeah.
what we said earlier.
Okay.
So why don't we put that at the beginning of the sentence? For the first 2 years, planted areas shall be given an application of, an annual application.
Not an annual.
Well, for the first 2 years.
Oh, okay.
For each of the first, in each of the first 2 years. Okay.
And then further down in the next paragraph, planting clumps shall be spaced 18 inches apart for high density. So that should be, you should actually remove the 18 inches, it should be 12 inches. And then here they have 24 inches apart for low density, which should be struck completely out.
Although, aren't we talking about 2 different kinds of plantings?
Well, I'm thinking for revegetation, if they were.
But these are transplanted clumps
Yeah.
as opposed to
Right.
starter.
Right, but I'm just saying that if they're transplanted, you're still transplanting either something that's there or you're bringing in something, but it should be 12 inches, not 24 inches.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe, since these are mature beach grass samples that have been pulled right from the same place.
I mean, but the plant still has to cover that 18 inches, so I'm just saying that 12 inches makes more sense even if.
I don't know, maybe.
Well, I
maybe-
mean, my thinking is that if you're transplanting a plant that's there, you're knocking off a lot of roots, so it's basically going to be performing like a new start.
Maybe.
Yeah. maybe. Weather always
Okay,
maybe.
while we're on that paragraph, at the end of that paragraph, there's, prior to implementing this method, a qualified landscaper shall be retained to refine the process, prepare more detailed specifications, and supervise its implementation. I'm suggesting that we add, when the method has proved effective, this paragraph shall be amended to reflect any beneficial changes, so that we don't just have this uncertainty
Yeah, yeah.
baked into that paragraph indefinitely.
I'm fine with that.
Can I make a suggestion that you wouldn't actually want to amend that paragraph? What you want to amend is its application to the permit process. Is that fair, a fair summary of what you're getting at?
Yes. And while we're on that page, in the last paragraph,
Page are we back?
second sentence, beach grass shall not be destroyed or removed prior to or during or after planting so that it can continue to stabilize the area as secondary plants are establishing themselves. So not just not destroying it or removing it beforehand, but don't get rid of it at all. Is my understanding of the probable intent there. Beach grass
Yeah.
shall not be destroyed or removed prior to or during or after planting. I'm going to suggest something, and that is that when we get to 9 o'clock, we break off from this and let Mark and Hannah or whoever work on it in the meantime and come back to it next month, because I don't think we're going to get to a vote this evening anyway. And I think, personally, I would like to, what? Did I say 9 o'clock? I meant 8 o'clock anyway. I think that's long enough on this for, it was beginning to seem like approaching 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock.
So
I'm willing to accept comments and entertain other people's opinions on the subject.
Next time.
Can we have food delivered?
Can I ask you a general question, Mark?
Only if you're going to cook it. I would enjoy that.
Okay.
We talked about, last time we talked about, implementing it and monitoring, and we talked about some kind of what happens if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And I couldn't find that in here at all.
I put some.
You said you put it in C. but
I found it
couldn't find
someplace, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, and I can't
where.
find it, and I read through it, and I was looking for that.
I was looking for it too. I didn't find it.
Yeah,
If you can find it, that'd be great.
I know we talked about
oh, we did,
Okay,
but I'm
I'm
just not,
looking now, what is this? Attachment B,
hold on,
page 3 at the bottom.
wait a minute. Attachment B,
This is about
page
half a dozen
3 at the
pages
bottom.
on
Okay.
from page 20.
Yeah,
Monitoring of forwarding and grading permits is mandatory. Monitoring shall be the responsibility of the applicant, et cetera. The city may retain the services of independent outside
Right.
experts and so forth.
that still doesn't address what I'm saying.
That's the place where it would go, so.
Right.
Okay,
So if they do not
this draft
monitor,
could be reduced.
If they don't monitor, then they don't get a new permit for a period of so many years, or,
so we should put that in there.
yeah.
There's a comment there from Mark.
Isn't that where we asked?
This draft policy could be reduced to monitoring of forwarding grading permits is mandatory with the implementing details in the oceanfront management overlay zone.
Yeah, if you look at attachment C on page 7, I've carried that forward. So you really could, if kind of in the interest of being brief about this, is put the
Oh.
one-sentence policy there and then the
Right.
detailed implementation on page 7 in attachment C.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
And then that idea of a penalty for failure to monitor would show up in attachment C on page 7.
Yeah, I see, because based on experience, for example, you know, the Nicholson property, when there was no compliance with what they agreed to do, then nothing happened. There was no penalty. You know, or it became laborious to try and figure out one, or if, you know, I just think that you have to have it in here. Otherwise, it's all too ambiguous, and it's like a slap on the hand, and I think,
So the penalty would, one of the things I heard is, might be, you can't apply for subsequent grading
For a
permits
period of
until
5
all
years.
monitoring is up to date.
Right.
well, no, I think for a period of time,
Okay.
Jen,
because
Ms.
then,
Kerr, I think, is pressing for something punitive to get people's serious attention.
I
rather
am.
than just-
I am.
Oh,
I am.
okay, well,
Okay.
you know, now we've finally done the things we were supposed to do a couple of years ago, and so now we can apply again.
Right, I want something
Failure to
punitive.
comply, complete and accurate monitoring report, 5-year suspension. That's
Yeah.
what we put down.
Right,
Okay.
I'm looking at attachment C, and I didn't see where that
it's not
got
in
put.
here.
Oh,
No, it
it's
isn't.
going to be put.
It would be
put
on-
Page 7.
On
I
page
see,
7,
okay.
about mid-page is the
Yeah.
place where that would go.
Okay, I was looking for it there and didn't find it.
Under the
Okay.
oceanfront management overlay zone
Yeah.
Yeah,
section.
and that's the implementing ordinance that would be driving a conditional use permit, for instance. So, yeah, that would be
Okay,
a place to put
good,
it.
good.
So 5-year suspension from any subsequent
Any-
permits,
Any subsequent grading,
failure to monitor.
right.
Can I talk to you just for a second about secondary stabilization and these items that they have suggested could be planted? To me, if you do that, it won't be a dune anymore. It's page 20
Of which, of the,
of the,
That's attachment
It's probably
A.
A.
yeah, of A.
okay,
When we're talking about
Uh-huh.
Sorrel and Evergreen, Huckleberry, and Purple Beach Pea, and Seashore Lupin, and Tree Lupin, then all of a sudden, it's taking over the beach, and it's like, I don't know, that happens sometimes when people are planting willows because they're in a velocity zone and they need to protect themselves, but I'm wondering if this is such a good idea.
So it sounds like, yeah, when I'm visualizing it, once you bring it up, it's sort of, it's like what we've got back behind, and the frontline development up, for example, around the neighborhood of the Nicholson property, which is, I think I'm safe in saying that that's stabilized dunes back there.
Yeah,
I haven't dug around in it, but
it's not even in the oceanfront management overlay zone, so.
right, but my point is that if I think I'm agreeing with Robin that if you start planting these things, then you may be essentially allowing these to become the kind of stabilized dunes that you've got inland from there. I don't. Any opinions from Crest?
Well, these species, they do stabilize the dunes. I don't know if any of you guys have walked the dunes up in Deerpark. They have, at least some of these species up on their dunes, they're along their oceanfront dunes.
Aren't they trying to create some more land there too for building and for that sort of thing? Because that's, yeah, over by the
So,
sewer.
I don't know what they're doing up there, but for dune stabilization, to trap the sand, your first line of attack is the grasses that we've been talking about. And then if you want to stabilize the sand even more, that's where these species come in. And then like the coastal forest would be the phase after this.
See, and it almost feels like a public taking of the dunes, which I don't think is what it's intended for.
is there a way that we can look into what the effect of this would in fact be, Mark, you think?
Yeah, yeah, we can.
I think, thank you for bringing that up, because that hadn't really occurred to me.
I think the intent was to fairly far back in the dune, plant these to trap the last of the sand before it gets up on people's porches, for instance. But there's probably a more kind of precise way of wording that to make it clear we are limiting it that way, if that's indeed what you want to do.
Well, and I meant private taking, not public taking, sorry.
Yes, please.
There are larger shrub-like species which would look larger on the dune, and some of them already grow on the dunes. Like the purple beach pea is very small, and they look like really small sweet peas, and you can see them at the north. And the small lupins are also they're not large lupins, they're really tiny. And they're native, and they grow in our dune systems, and they're small, and so they just add to the diversity. Obviously, salal is a little larger, the evergreen huckleberry is larger, so there's a little difference in here between kind of larger shrubs and then smaller plants that grow in between the grasses and assist with holding the sand.
What if we came up with some language that makes it clear that we're limiting this to the far inland side of these dunes?
That would make sense to me. And obviously, these plants, in the conditions where they'll be growing, they're not going to reach maximum height.
Right.
These species are all fairly prevalent already, and without any of those ill effects, I think. But if we can tighten up where this is allowed, I think that might get at what you're looking at.
Good.
So we can come up with some language there, probably in that opening paragraph, that limits that to a more precisely defined area. One of the things I was thinking about, both on this question and on that question about where the foredune, the face of the dune is, there's some drawings in Dr. Allen's report that kind of illustrate these things, and if we can incorporate them into this document, that this is a place where illustrations can be used to some effect, and if we can find an illustration that covers this situation, that might be something I'd recommend to you.
This is, what we have been plotting around in here is basically the CREST, what we have been calling the CREST report. So, yeah. So I was envisioning putting illustrations into the ordinance, which I think is done only very sparingly.
We use them when we have to, but it's kind of when there's no other alternative.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. It's just the way it is. Since you're getting close to your hour, all of these changes that we've talked about are going to spawn things going forward into the comp plan and the zoning ordinance. Should I go ahead and make the changes here and carry those forward for your next meeting?
Any other
Sure.
opinions?
In another color.
There you go, yes, yeah.
But I have a question, Mark, an overreaching question, and I just want it answered so that I can, when I look through the overlay, I can understand it thoroughly. Am I wrong in saying that one of the changes is that grading can happen without planning commission approval? It provides for maintenance grading given out by the city, and the only time it would need to be approved by the planning commission would be if it was over the 2,500 cubic yards.
Yeah, there's two instances right now where grading in the dunes can occur without your approval.
Okay.
Maybe three. The two that happen. One of them is maintenance grading, which you pointed out,
Right.
and that could only happen if you issued a foredune grading plan today. They did the work. They got more inundation there over that time period that's specified. Then I could go and say, yeah, you can go take it back down to where the planning commission had previously approved within that time frame.
Okay.
That's an administrative thing that I can do.
Right.
That's maintenance grading. Remedial grading is when I also administratively approve proposals to take the sand within 30 feet of foundations. And that's usually when it's inundating
Right.
people's landscaping
I
and their
understand
decks and
that.
stuff.
Yes.
That's another administrative
Right.
approval. There's also a path for clearing sand on beach accesses, which hasn't been used here, but there is a path for, a permit path for that too. So those are instances where foredune grading is approved, excuse me. Those are instances where grading activity in the dunes can be approved without going through this conditional use permit process.
Okay. And that already, okay, but,
That's the way the code's set up right now.
right. And,
Doesn't mean it has to be that way.
okay, and are there any changes in this code that you see that change that?
Well, no. So there's a couple things to think about here. One is maintenance foredune grading is pretty closely linked to foredune grading for views. So I think
Yes.
you're clearly within the notice to do work on that.
Okay.
Remedial grading really is different.
No, I
And
understand that.
If you recommend that the city council do some tinkering with that, I would probably advertise the city council hearing differently to make sure
Right.
people
And
realize that
and
that
I'm
was
not
on the
really,
table.
right now,
I know.
I'm not even on remedial. Yeah.
And likewise with public access
Right.
maintenance.
I'm talking just about the maintenance.
So maintenance, foredune grading for views and maintenance grading are very tightly linked and are within the notice that we sent out, and are both related to what's on the table in front of you. So
Okay. And
clearly fair game for you on this.
Okay. So one of the options is to not have any maintenance, no, well, no, I don't mean it that way. I mean to always have to have a conditional use permit for any grading. That's one of the options.
Yeah.
No matter, even if it's maintenance grading, even if it's, within a 2,500 cubic yard.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
I think that would be, I don't think you want to tie the hands of the planner from permitting people to go in if they've got sand up against their front door.
No, that's a different type of grading.
That's remedial
Yeah,
grading.
okay.
That really
I'm
is
talking
different.
about
Okay.
maintenance. That's all I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
It's maintenance grading,
Yeah.
which is the same thing as view grading. Really?
Yeah, it's talking about the same
Right.
situation. It's,
And I had a hard time figuring out what the changes in this were from the original ordinance.
I think we highlighted them all, but I mean.
Yeah, I know.
At this point,
I know, but I know that, but I just, for some reason, I couldn't, the way it was laid out, I had a hard time seeing it. But anyway, okay, that's just what I wanted to know. And also, another thing I was hoping everyone would think about is on the very last page of this whole thing, on the very last page of the overlay, which is page 12, it talks about measures to be taken to maintain dunes at a particular height via dune scraping in order to retain views of the ocean. Okay? Now, I'm not clear at this point, because I remember all the public testimony we had. People weren't talking about having views of the ocean. They were talking about having views of the beach. The very last page of this whole document.
12 of C.
Uh-huh.
Last page
12
in
of
this
C, number 5. Okay, and I'm not clear what it means, and I would think we should think about that. Retaining ocean views, what does that mean? Does that mean that people were complaining they couldn't see their kids playing on the beach? Okay, but they could still see some of the ocean, but they couldn't see the beach. So what is it that, what we have to think about, what our ultimate goal here is, as far as retaining, what does that mean, retaining ocean views? Does it mean seeing your kids playing on the beach? Does it mean seeing the ocean? Does it mean seeing Haystack Rock? What does it mean? What is enough?
Well, it's so subjective.
It is. I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. It's
Well, it's not
retain views of
subjective
the
in the
ocean.
sense that the dune height is limited to whatever our margin of error is. So that determines how much of the beach you're going to see. So, the little darlings can be playing in front of a sand dune and not be seen from the second story of somebody's,
Right, I'm just thinking back on all the public testimony, and there was a lot of testimony about what people used to be able to see and what they couldn't
well,
see now.
there wasn't a dune there.
Right,
And I don't think they'd like the wave that would come in either.
yeah, I know, I guess I'm just curious what is enough? It doesn't,
Enough is gonna be whatever the maximum height of the dune must,
and that should be what we're aiming for,
well, that's what our document allows.
as far as grading, but if it's a conditional use permit, then it doesn't have to be that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. In other words, is it the maximum that we're gonna aim for? Or are we looking for something else?
Oh, I mean, we talk in here about balancing, interest in ocean views against, having, major waves walking through your house.
Mhm. No, I just think we should think about what we think what the objective is
Good.
in the long run.
We've now, assuming that people agree with my suggestion that we carry this over.
I've been waiting here to go to page 6.
Go for it. Page 6 of,
Of which part?
5.6 of the first.
okay, of attachment A. Okay.
Where we're talking about monitoring, and we have various indicators of success or failure. And one of the things that I, kept talking about the canary in the coal mine. Well, the reason I wanted to have the razor clams in there is so that would be one item that would be monitored. We could be able to know, that
In the wrong place.
that this plan is successfully protecting at least razor clams.
Remind me, we're on page 6 you're talking about.
Yeah.
Very top.
Very top,
Ah.
first paragraph.
The city will complete a
Yes, okay.
preliminary evaluation after 2 years, extent of which the plan objectives have been achieved. Existing profile elevations volumes versus design profile elevation volumes, percent vegetation coverage and degree of floor dune stabilization, extent of access to public facilities, extent of ocean views from residence areas, etc. Well, before we get to extent of access or extent of ocean views, I would also like, a measurement of the clam population.
Except that how are you going to determine whether the clam population decreases or increases based on putting sand on top of them or other factors? There's so many things happening in the ocean
Right,
right now.
but that's
How would
just-
you know that? Causation, I don't see how
I'm
you...
not sure there is any causation that you can derive from that, but it's an indicator, along with a number of other indicators, of the success or failure or partial failure or partial success of the plan.
But if there were no clams, how would you know that it was because of the sand and not because of, some other kind of die-off of some sort?
Well, that would be possible to investigate, actually, but people do dig clams. And if, people were digging clams one year and people were finding no clams the next 2 years, I'd like to know that.
And I think you could probably say that they dig clams, they will, if this happens, they will have dug clams in the place where sand has been put, and they will also have dug clams in places where sand will not have been put, and you can
So
compare those.
it wouldn't be like the
There are ways
sea
to
stars, because
conduct
that
a study.
happened over a huge geographical area, yeah. Okay.
But I just think that, this is all an effort to follow the goals. And I think watching out for the flora and the fauna is one of the goals
Oh,
we ought
I
to
agree.
keep in mind when we're monitoring this sucker.
I have a terminological question, and I've lost where it is. Well, it's at the beginning of
Page 6.
the last attachment, I think, of the state goal.
Oh,
And the question is just this. I have noticed over the years that the word use in planner talk seems to mean building or something like that, and I wanted to confirm that in the state goal, it means what the rest of us mean by use, and what it's used for.
are you talking about the goal 18 language?
Yes.
Yeah, that's on page 20 through 3 of attachment A.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
all right.
I really
Okay,
got lost.
Here we go,
Okay.
okay.
So, yeah, here actually uses is the broad
Yes.
planner version of that, but in fact, in beaches and dunes, well, yeah, it's the large version of that, including buildings, for instance.
Including, okay.
Yeah,
But,
so
okay.
the thing you need to know about beaches and dunes is that doesn't cover just the area we're talking about west of the zone line.
Right.
It also covers where all those houses are.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think, this apparently came up someplace, uses, in the right-hand column of page 23, uses shall be based on the capabilities and limitations and so forth. So that, the intent really is to use it, to interpret that in more or less the way that we've gotten used to
Yeah,
interpreting it on the
not,
planning commission.
not just activities, but also actual development.
Okay, thank you.
In goal 18 on page 25, the second paragraph is interesting because it sort of goes along with some of the stuff Joe was saying.
Yeah, I made it, I don't remember why, but I made a mark
Yeah, me
next to
too.
that.
Page 25, Joe, second, under guidelines for goal 18, that second paragraph towards the end especially, the habitat, the last sentence in particular. So that's in goal 18, what you were requesting.
And migratory species of special importance.
Yeah, special importance, specifically for razor plants.
No, it doesn't say that, but it does say
But,
You pick yours, that's the
coastal species, and that's definitely a coastal species. So,
okay. Are we agreed to move ahead to tree removal and, what was it, and preservation or something?
Okay, we've got our marching orders, and we'll queue this up
Good.
again next
And
month.
don't you wish you were leaving it this month?
Further markup
months.
for things like changing policies to policies and
Yeah, typos and things like that. Yeah, if you
typos and things like that.
feel free to communicate those types of things directly to me.
Okay, I shall.
If you're switching over to tree removal, you need to get Commissioner Patrick back up here.
Yes. Sorry. Okay, let's see, I've probably got some wording here. This is the continuation of the consideration of ZO 18-03, tree removal ordinance amendments. ZO 1803, City of Cannon Beach request for zoning ordinance text amendments to Chapter 17.70, tree removal. The proposed amendments address the protection of trees from unintended damage during construction. The request will be reviewed against the criteria of the Municipal Code, Section 17.87, 17.86.070.A, amendments criteria. Consideration of this item has been continued from the July 26, 2018 meeting. The public testimony portion of the hearing was closed then. If the Planning Commission wishes to make a recommendation to the City Council, an appropriate motion is in order. Mark, you want to remind me where we stand on this?
So attachment A has, and we haven't run out of colors here yet. So the yellow is you heard this a couple 3, 4, 5 months ago, sent it up to the council. They heard some additional testimony from Will Kaplinger that you did not have the advantage of hearing and wanted you to consider that. So you did, and that Kaplinger material is in green here. And it shows up on the last page, on page 4 for the most part. Kaplinger also suggested that you look at this tree protection zone, and that is something you directed me to do on the 726 hearing. That's in magenta on the first page and goes on to the second page. And then you also at the 726 hearing streamlined some of the language, and that's also in magenta. Some of it's on the first page. A lot of it shows up on page 3 and 4. So there's some sort of copy editing there in magenta, and then this tree protection zone. As I wrote up this tree protection zone, there's probably a more compact way of wording it, but this way it does the job too. So if this is, if we've got this to the point where you're ready to make a recommendation to the council, they're waiting for this to come back.
So I have a point to make. On page 1 of it, under 2.5 existing trees, 6 inches DBH. Now, I know what you mean by that, but we got to have some kind of a reference to that that's written out.
Footnote, maybe?
Well, or just in.
Don't spell it out on the
First time I use it?
First time spell it out and then
Yeah.
put a
I
parenthesis.
am breast
Yeah.
height.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
And on page 2, on Amendment 3.5, the natural features, including trees and structures on adjacent property having a visual or other significant relationship with the site. I think we should not strike out including trees. That, I think, should be included as a natural feature.
And that's fine. The reason I struck it out is that we put in a brand new 6, which covers just trees. So the intent there was to create a separate subsection for trees, which is item 6, just below there, which means you don't have to address it under item 5. But you could leave including trees in there under item 5, and it would have the same effect.
I mean, I think it makes it clear to
Yeah, let's do
everybody.
both.
Yeah. And then on page 3, Amendment 5 on C, you struck several things there, but I think you want to say removal of a dead tree.
That's what it says.
That was the intent there.
Okay. And then on the attachment, on attachment B, page 4, you did emphasize earlier in the report about the TBZ is defined as a circle whose center is the center of a subject tree and whose radius is 1 foot per 1 inch, and that should be 2 foot for each inch.
Yeah, and that's the way that's carried forward on the current draft.
Which is the old
What you're
one.
looking at is the old
that
draft there.
old-
So it is, I just checked, it's
Yeah,
on
yeah,
page
okay.
4 of the current draft, it is correct.
You know, I knew it wasn't, okay. All right, that's all I have.
And on page 3, it would be 5, no, G,
This is 3 of the,
Current draft.
G1, the native trees. Should it just be trees?
Yeah, there was, somewhere else it does say trees, and.
Sorry, I haven't caught up with you. Where are
this
you?
is on page 3 of attachment B.
Yes.
Attachment B.
Native.
Well, no.
Attachment
the
B,
old one.
that's the old one.
Yeah.
Attachment B is this is the
Yes.
new one,
The
attachment
the
A.
current draft has,
Yeah.
it just says the trees to be removed. It strikes native. So we did bring
Okay.
that forward.
Okay, thank you.
We don't even want to, attachment B isn't, it's just attachment A we're working
It's there for historical interest.
on. Yeah.
Okay.
So So I read through all this, and something that wasn't clear to me, and I was kind of reading it as if I were building a house. And what isn't clear to me is whether, when I bring my plans in to have the building inspector look them over and say, yeah, you're ready to go, you've got everything marked out right and everything. When I do that, should I be indicating on my site plan the possible trees that I might end up whacking the roots off of when I was excavating?
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm not sure that's clear as you go all the way through this as to,
Well, that tree protection zone is an attempt to define the area that roots would be impacted by excavation.
maybe, but not all trees have the same root patterns.
Yeah, that's true.
That's one of the things that came up, and this is approaching the thing that I brought up when we were going through the minutes, that we had we had two recommendations about how to identify where you can expect that the roots were going to be. One was just this geometric projection of this many feet per diameter. And the other one, I don't remember the details of, but it seems to me that it involved much more judgment on the part of the arborist. And did that stay in here someplace?
Yeah, well, it is in, look at Joe Baldwin's letter of June 21st, and he talks a little bit about that, about the tree species
variables to
rating,
consider.
slope, aspects, soils,
Okay,
recent disturbances, those types of variables. And you're right, it's much more of a case-by-case basis evaluation by a qualified arborist, rather than a one-size-fits-all number.
And my suggestion was that it should be the applicant's choice whether to go with the geometric approach, which would be more likely, presumably, to result in a larger area. If you're building on a lot where you say, I've got plenty of room, I don't need to worry about that, I can fence that off according to the geometric definition. Good. If you say, my lot is constraining where I can do things, I want to see if I can get a smaller protected area, then you go with the Baldwin approach.
But the
It's
geometric,
probably going to cost you more.
and the geometric approach has another downside if you're a tree hugger. And that is that all of a sudden you can expand the area of endangered root system and just mark them all off, clear the whole lot. In a 50 by 100 foot lot, no sweat.
I don't know why
Well,
would you
if
be able to do that?
if you're looking at a species that is likely to go deep rather than wide, as opposed to a spruce tree, which tends to go wide, if you treat a fir tree the same as you would treat a spruce tree, chances are you may miss the fir tree's roots when you dig your foundation or hit the spruce tree. So my point is, if you use the geometric radius from the center of the tree to define whether or not you were going to have this tree removed because it's going to be whacked by the foundation excavation, you could end up with a lot more lots without any trees, I think, than if you have an actual arborist come in and judge the the merits of the argument.
I guess my answer would be that if it's the expert opinion that that's in fact a danger, that the ratio of protected area to diameter of the tree be increased far enough that it would prevent that we don't have to go with the 2 feet per inch ratio if,
Well, which way are we going? Are we using the arborist, or are we using the?
I'm saying that if we run along with my suggestion of giving the applicant the choice of which way he wants to go, and if we conclude that in fact that would present a danger that you're projecting, that we could remedy that by increasing the protection zone as a function of the diameter. I'm assuming that, who was it that proposed the geometric?
Kaplinger.
The Kaplinger is, is a pro-tree guy along with it. I don't know him personally. And that he would not propose something that he thought would put us in danger of what you're concerned about.
Well, did you see Joel Alden's letter, though?
Mm-hmm. I
He
haven't
is
reread it
concerned
because I
about
couldn't find it before, but
It's in the
Yeah.
yeah,
attachment.
I now
He-
saw it, yeah.
He is concerned about that, and he's concerned
Mhm.
about the
Okay.
the
well,
geometric
let me
thing.
look at that again. If I had been more, let's see. I read it from.
See, under proposed solution is really what, at the very bottom of there is where from there on, it seems.
Depending on tree location, protection zone may not be achievable. Tree for large-scale projects, but question becomes, how much of the root zone is protected or how much root zone is protected? Okay, tree species, maybe. Profile position.
There could be an exception, but I do feel pretty satisfied with the 2-foot, 1-inch caliber.
He's saying that that's good, that works, isn't he saying that works for large lots, like large-scale projects, but that for, a 50 by 100 lot, it's better to have an arborist? Am I reading it wrong?
My reading of it was that on a large-scale project, you've got room to maneuver,
Right.
and so you can afford to have a big protected area.
Right, that's
But-
just what Joe said. But under proposed solution, he says require a root zone survey and recommendations from a consulting arborist with experience in analysis of tree root systems as part of the building permit. The proposed language relating to protection fencing based on tree size is not practical or sufficient in retaining significant trees except on large lots.
Okay, I interpret that as meaning that if you impose the geometric approach, that you're going to give the applicant too small a buildable area in a lot of.
That's a
People have the right to build their house.
Yeah, that's, I don't, right, that's not what he's saying. I think what he's saying is you're not protecting the trees enough. It's better protection for the trees to have an arborist make the determination rather than using, because we have small lots here, not big lots. I mean, this is what he's saying. I don't know Balden. I don't know how good he is or anything. I'm just saying, he's an arborist, this is what he says. It's different than what Kaplinger said.
The result is, there probably are instances where the result is different, but in general, you're going to just be it's conceivable that somebody could, without an arborist's help, using the geometric method, identify trees and discover that none of them are in any danger by the application. But when they go in there and actually excavate the footings, they go, holy cow, there are roots in there. Who would have guessed? And that's a possibility. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know. Joe and Will would, I guess, have a better idea of how often that's going to happen. But the geometric approach has kind of some safety factors built into it, certainly more than we have now.
Then why do you think he wrote this letter?
I think it's self-explanatory. He just disagrees with that approach,
Right.
wants to see a more comprehensive one. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure as applied on a small lot, it's going to have that much difference. The criteria for removing a tree are still the same. And it's easy to conceive of some crooked arborist coming in and manipulating our policies here. I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. There are quite a few safeguards in this process. It's possible to hypothesize of that situation, though.
Well, I don't know, the letter makes sense to me, what he's saying. No, it does.
So, I don't even know how to pose that question. It seems to me that we have at least three possible ways to deal with this. We could take the Baldwin approach, or the Kaplinger approach, or the hybrid approach that I was suggesting. I'm assuming that the Baldwin approach is going to be more expensive for the applicant. I don't know, and that was a concern that I had there.
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because you've got to have, you're requiring an arborist to come in and apply his
Yeah.
experience
So
on
what?
that one, and it looks like you can just take see how big the tree is around, and take the pi r squared or whatever and find out what the diameter is, or you can just.
So you think the
and then
purpose of this
say,
is to make
okay,
it
how far out?
cheapest for the applicant, or what? I don't get that. I don't get why that should even be a consideration of which is more expensive. I just don't get it.
I think it's a consideration.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm just crabby now, but I just don't see it, that's even relevant.
Well, I'm kind of proud of Tree City USA, and I really would like to have more emphasis on greenery here in the community. It calms us all down and makes us a little happier. And so I would like to see a more careful look at what's going on.
Okay.
You mean between those two options?
But
I'd like to see the
go with the
arborist involved.
Baldwin
Yeah.
recommendation. Okay.
I would too.
I don't think anybody's chiming in on the side of what I was recommending, so I don't need it. Okay.
So one more point on page 2, middle of the page. The planning director may waive any of these requirements if not applicable for particular developments or sites.
I'm sorry, we're on,
So
oh, I
page
see,
2.
okay, yeah, the first
Right
plain
after
text.
12.
Yeah.
What kind of magic do you have there?
You know, you have to rely on me to do some of these things.
Yeah.
You can't be in the office every day
Yeah.
and make these decisions. They hire me to do that. So sometimes you just have to rely on me. You don't have to trust me, but you do, the city does rely on me.
Well, the flood okay, if it's not in the flood overlay zone, then you don't,
Yeah.
he doesn't have to make that requirement.
Yeah,
If it's not in the wetland overlay zone, then he can make a determination that he can waive that requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just about, if there are no trees on the site, I can waive the arborist report.
Right.
It's
You can
that
tell him
simple.
to plant 2 trees.
Well, no, I can't. But,
Suggested.
yeah, I mean, there are just situations where, you can't anticipate it, and you have to build some leeway into that.
Okay. I just want an explanation.
Did I get a little defensive on that point?
Well, that's good.
No, you're just standing up for your job.
Okay, and I have some more wordsmithing kind of things here on page 1. In item 1, there, the indented site plan, let's see where that, I guess it's all one sentence. Except for interior renovations of existing structures and exterior renovations, blah, blah, blah. No new construction shall be approved unless a site plan meeting the requirements of 17.90.190 has been submitted and approved. Rather than saying any new construction shall not be approved, say no new construction shall be approved, and then also that the site plan not only has been submitted, but that it's been approved. And maybe that's
And that,
legitimately implicit, but I didn't.
and that language shows up immediately below, too, under 90.190, so.
Yes, and that's, let's see, exterior renovations, blah, 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 ground disturbance, no new construction shall be approved unless a site plan
Right.
containing the following
Got that.
Yeah,
is submitted, and I'm not sure, maybe that's where the approved and approved. And then items at the bottom of the page, items 5, 6, and then 7 at the top of the next page, add the words locations of before existing trees in all 3 of those. That
it's also 4, actually, it's,
existing structures,
actually, all of these are
adjoining
locational.
property if within,
Isn't that something we asked you to take out the last time?
Doesn't look like it.
I thought there was.
those,
Everything
Oh,
on,
no, that was later, that's. number
Location
5.
of easements of, well, you could also,
site plan,
everything on that list is locational,
right,
so it's,
existing
You-
infrastructure.
yeah, you could just put that in the top.
yeah, it would go, the location verbiage would go in the introductory paragraph.
Right,
Good,
That
okay.
entire list is
Yes,
locational.
except for new
right.
exterior renovation, ground disturbance shall be approved unless a site plan containing
The location,
following locations, something like
location
that.
of the following,
The
whatever,
location of the following.
yes, period.
Except, you don't need to have, you're not going to have location of the easements, are you? Maybe so.
Yeah, no, they're
course you are.
locational.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
And existing proposed features needed to calculate lot. Maybe it does apply to everything. Data needed to calculate oceanfront setbacks. Probably not.
This is all spatial data, so I think it's.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Better, thank you.
Why don't you just say the following information?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Bottom of page 2, I don't think there's any reason to indent item 6.
That was a typo.
That's
yeah.
just, yeah. I think that's it. Yeah.
Do you want to see these back in front of you before you make a recommendation?
Any reason not to?
Yes.
It's
I think
entirely
I
your
would
call.
like-
Yeah, and it's a lot of changes.
Yeah.
So then you should just direct me to continue this to the September hearing.
Are we agreed on that?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
That date is September 27th.
good.
When we stipulate that that would be the last time we
I'm prepared to stipulate to that. Okay. Is there a motion to authorize the chair to sign the appropriate order?
I so move.
Second. We agree to that by consensus?
Yes.
Okay. anything interesting in the tree? I don't remember whether we've got a tree report.
Yeah, it's in there, right at the very last document.
Oh, I've got other,
The
oh, yes, okay, thank you.
trees planted by
There
city
it is.
staff falls way down in the summertime, but that should perk up
Uh-huh,
as we get out of the summer.
good. Okay, ongoing planning items. Mark, have you got anything?
Well, November seems like a long ways off, but in the past, you've usually moved your meeting date to
Oh, yes.
Monday of that week. And if that's still okay with you, I need to start programming things for those dates, so I would, unless you,
I personally would prefer it on a Tuesday, because I think that's when you did it before.
is it
I was thinking it
Yeah.
was, yeah. I said, did a little hiccup when you said Monday.
Yeah.
Tuesday? It is.
Oh.
And then we have, I don't know whether the city manager's talked too much about this at all. There's 3 candidates who are going to be interviewing for my position in the next first week of September, I believe those interviews are scheduled.
Right.
So if that bears fruit, that person will probably be here sometime in October, and hopefully in time for your October meeting.
Good. And remind me how long you're still here.
My tenure, I've told people I'd be leaving at the end of October, but I've also told the city manager that if I need to hang on for a few extra weeks to ensure the transition goes smoothly, I'll do that.
Thank you. And Mark,
Why I feel sorry for whoever's coming in at this point. Right in the middle of the June thing? Holy cow.
I didn't look at the calendar. Do we need to plan?
Yeah,
Do we
right.
want to plan to also reschedule the December meeting? I don't know when Christmas falls. I don't have my calendar.
I don't know if I have a calendar going forward that
A
far.
calendar somewhere hiding in my pocket.
Yeah, so the fourth Thursday will be the 27th.
Right.
So you can't move it up a week because DRB
Right.
would meet on the 21st.
Well, the 27th.
27th is probably okay. Yeah,
Excuse
that's
me,
okay with me.
20th. So the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 17, 18, 19 would be possible targets for that.
I don't mind having it on the 27th.
Monday does
What
not
about other
work for
people?
me at all.
You can
Oh,
do it on
Tuesday doesn't work for me.
the 27th would be your normally scheduled day.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, do you want it for,
Yeah,
at least for now, want to
okay
just
with
keep
me.
that?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
That works for me.
and then
Yeah, first-
maybe in October, just, we can revisit that to
Yeah,
make sure that
good.
still fits your schedules.
Good.
In October, we'll have a better idea of what
What?
your workload looks like on that
So
day.
it would be
Yeah.
the 27th.
27th would be the regularly scheduled date.
And then what did they change the
And
October? one?
now you were saying Tuesdays don't work. Lisa was saying she wanted it Tuesday. So the 20th.
Oh,
Mondays don't work, I said.
That's okay.
I think at this point, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we've done Tuesday before.
Yep, so let's do Tuesday, because that was almost
And
the
as people may be aware, at the end of this year, I'm termed out. So if you have people that you would like to mention that fact to the members of this commission, you might be thinking about that. And also, if anybody who is thinking about whether or not they are interested in being the chair when I'm not here, could be deciding whether you want to ask me
The council will probably make that appointment in December and open it
to the commission.
to the commission,
And then,
and then open a position in November, and then you'll elect officers in January.
I just want to thank you, Mark. That's a lot of work you did
Yeah.
on these, changing these plans. I mean, really,
We are not done yet.
I know, but I mean, just what you did last time was impressive to me.
Yeah, and
Well,
I
thank you.
appreciate we're going through the process. It really is,
Yeah.
I think, a good collaboration. And Alicia, we'll miss you.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you going to do something cool?
Yeah, I'm going to nursing school.
Oh, wow.
gee.
Help us all out.
Oh,
Lazy again.
Go to the order? No? Okay.
Thank you.
So Alicia, have you been accepted in nursing school? So you did all the preliminary, you got through, that's so hard, because I have a friend who's doing it. So you took anatomy and physiology and passed it? Wow. How many times did you have to take it? Really?